Hello everyone, this is Story Hunter. Today I would like to ask you a question. Who do you think could have been more successful, Gandalf or Saruman? Which of them had a chance to become the strongest magician? I describe these characters based on my opinion. Perhaps I'm wrong somewhere. I'm interested in your opinion on this matter. Saruman was originally a powerful maia of Aule the Smith, named Curumo, later in Sindarin Curunir. From the beginning, he was much like Sauron, being ambitious and cunning, and desiring order. As Tarandor, Saruman was among the 5 guardians who were sent to reinforce Melian and the already active guardians in protecting the newly awakened elves from Melkor's emissaries. In Valinor, the land of the Valar, a council was called by Manwë, Eru's regent, shortly after Sauron's defeat by the last alliance of elves and men. Though the Dark Lord was overthrown, he had not been effectively vanquished, and his shadow began to fall upon Middle-earth a second time. It was decided to send 5 emissaries to Middle-earth. These should be mighty peers of Sauron, yet forego might and clothe themselves in flesh, as they were intended to help men and elves unite against Sauron. The wizards were forbidden, however, from matching the Dark Lord in power and fear, or trying to dominate the free peoples. Curumo was one of those who volunteered, whereas the last one, Olorin, later known as Gandalf, was commanded by Manwë to go too. It was from this point that Curumo began to be jealous of Olorin, due to Varda's decision to send Olorin not as the 3rd Istar, but as the 2nd. He also was charged to take Eowendil, later called Radagast, to please Yavanna, which Curumo did not wish to do, and this led to contempt for the latter wizard. The others who were chosen were Alatar and Palando, the blue wizards. Curumo then was appointed overall leader of the group. The 5 wizards arrived separately at the Grey Havens in the west of Eriador around the year TA 1000. Curumo appeared first, but apparently neglected to take Eowendil with him. Eowendil came later alongside Olorin. Only the keeper of the havens, Círdan the shipwright, knew Curumo's nature and purpose. Curumo would later discover that Círdan had given Narya, the Red Ring, to Olorin upon their first landing in Middle-earth. Even though Curumo was recognized as the head of the order while Olorin was not, Círdan had divined Olorin as the wisest and greatest of the Istari. Curumo's jealousy of Olorin grew from these events, perhaps because he feared that he would eventually supplant him as chief of the wizards. To the elves, Curumo became known as Curunir, whereas men called him Saruman, the name by which he was afterwards remembered. The White Messenger and the 2 blue wizards went into the east of Middle-earth. After 1.5 millennia, Saruman returned to the west, just as Sauron's power was growing again at Dol Guldur in Mirkwood. When the White Council was formed around the year 2463 of the Third Age, in order to counter Sauron, Saruman was appointed its leader, though Galadriel wanted Gandalf in this position. Saruman refused to step down due to his pride, while Gandalf had declined. The White Messenger, though, continued to resent the Grey Pilgrim. He also had an intense dislike for Radagast, whom he dismissed as a fool. At this point, Saruman had begun to sense the resurgence of Sauron. This was also the same year that Sauron's One Ring was taken by the Stor Smaugl, later called Gollum, who disappeared with it into the Misty Mountains for hundreds of years. The White Wizard's extensive research, especially into ring lore, had led him to admire the Dark Lord, and he fell into the folly of imitating him. Saruman believed he could be the ruler of Middle-earth in Sauron's likeness and have his own will by force. It was during the meetings of the White Council that Saruman first noted Gandalf's interest in hobbits and the Shire, and believing that all his deeds related to some as yet undisclosed plan of his for self-enhancement, the White Wizard himself began keeping a closer watch on the Grey Pilgrim and sent spies to the Shire to report on all his movements. At first, he himself visited it secretly, but stopped when he realized that its inhabitants had noticed him. Amongst the purposes of his visits was to procure some of the halfling's pipeweed, since in secret imitation of Gandalf, and for which he publicly belittled him, Saruman had begun to smoke. In the year TA 2759, Saruman came to the crowning of Friolaf Hildason in Rohan, wooing him with gifts and flattery. With the permission of both the steward of Gondor, Beren, and the king of Rohan, Friolaf, Saruman settled in Orthanc at Isengard as both warden of the tower and representative of Minas Tirith. Though a nominal ally to both the Rohirrim and Gondorians, the White Wizard's main goal all along had been to eventually claim the stronghold as his own seat of power. As he had hoped, Saruman also found one of the remaining palantiri in Orthanc and concealed his use of it from the rest of the White Council. In TA 2850, Gandalf entered Dol Guldur and confirmed that the evil presence was indeed Sauron. On Saruman's advice, the White Council decided against attacking Dol Guldur. The Grey Pilgrim would later remark that it was at this meeting that he first began to suspect that the White Wizard desired to attain the One Ring. Saruman's real intention was to allow Sauron to build up his strength so that the ring would reveal itself and he could claim it first. Concealing his contempt, Saruman persuaded Radagast to teach him how to tame birds and beasts. These he used as spies for his own purposes, unbeknownst to the Brown Wizard. He later found that the enemy had more knowledge of the possible location of the One Ring than he expected. Therefore, in TA 2941, Saruman finally agreed to an assault upon Dol Guldur. The attack was successful, and by the devices of the White Wizard, the Dark Lord was driven from the fortress. At the last meeting of the White Council in TA 2953, Saruman claimed that the ring had been passed down Anduin to the sea. He then ceased all cooperation with the Wise, taking Isengard for his own and fortifying it. Surrounding himself with all who hated Gondor and Rohan, that is, northern orcs from the Misty Mountains, Dunlendings, and other evil things, Saruman troubled the borders of the Rohirrim during the reign of Thengel and began building his own army. Around TA 2990, Saruman started the special breeding orcs at Isengard, and as Morgoth and Sauron had done before him, crossbred orcs with men to make half-orcs, and eventually his own Uruk-hai, both of whom could endure the sunlight. Soon enough, Sauron, who had returned to Mordor, used the palantir captured from Minas Ithil, which had since become known as Minas Morgul, to establish contact with Saruman's Orthanc stone. Daunted with threats and lured with promises of power, the White Wizard was ensnared and became one of the Dark Lord's greatest agents, desiring or no longer opposing his victory. Though the Wise were suspicious of Saruman's designs regarding the ring, they were not aware he was now an ally or servant of Sauron. Far from a faithful subordinate, however, the White Wizard plotted to usurp his new master's place as Lord of the Rings and Middle-earth. If the gamble for the ring failed, Saruman's fawning and usefulness would see him rise at Sauron's side, in time becoming the true power behind his throne. The White Wizard failed to understand that he was little more than the Dark Lord's puppet, and would have ultimately been cast aside. Sauron knew, or guessed, Saruman's thoughts, even without the aid of palantiri or of spies. Motivated by both his master's instructions and thoughts of his own dominion, the White Wizard made the final preparations for the conquest of Rohan. Aided by his orcs, Saruman slowly turned Nan-Curunir into a child's model or a slave's flattery of Mordor. Trees were cut down and replaced by caverns filled with forges, furnaces, and other machines. Around TA 3000, the shadow of Mordor reached out to Rohan, and Saruman sent many of his Uruk-hai to join the northern orcs and the Mordor orcs in raiding the eastern villages. To further weaken the kingdom, Saruman bought Grima Wormtongue, Theoden's royal counselor, with the promise of Eowyn's hand by TA 3014, and used him as a mole in the court of Edoras to sap the king's strength with deceitful advice and poisons. Suspecting a potential connection between the ring and the Shire, based mostly on Gandalf's interest there, Saruman instructed his agents to infiltrate the Shire and keep tabs on the comings and goings of any important hobbits. His dealings with Pipeweed had also earned him allies among the Sackville Baggins and Bracegirdle families, who owned many plantations. Further trying to emulate his master, the White Wizard crafted his own lesser ring and similarly styled himself as Ringmaker. Using the kind-hearted Radagast as an unwitting pawn, Saruman summoned Gandalf to Isengard. So it was that upon Gandalf's arrival, Saruman revealed his betrayal and true intentions, shedding the title of Saruman the White in favor of Saruman of Many Colors. Saruman announced his desire to rule Middle-earth as Sauron's right hand, or to supplant him using the ring. He then demanded that the Grey Pilgrim submit to him or to his master. Gandalf refused both choices, for which Saruman imprisoned him atop Orthanc. This way, Saruman thought he would force Gandalf into revealing the ring's whereabouts. 9. Before sending him as a prisoner to Sauron in Mordor. The White Wizard had even revealed to Sauron he had got as his prisoner the Grey Pilgrim. 10. But Gandalf later escaped with help from Gwaihir the Windlord, one of the Great Eagles, and made Saruman's treachery known to the rest of the Free Peoples at the Council of Elrond. By one account, the Nazgul came 2 days after Gandalf's escape, and Saruman used his voice to persuade the Morgul Lord that he did not know the ring's location, but that Gandalf did, and that they should seek him nearby. Hearing this, the Nazgul went back on the main road and instead found Grima on his way to tell Saruman that Gandalf had been to Edoras. Fearing for his life, Wormtongue revealed that the corrupted wizard had withheld information and told the Ringwraiths how to reach the Shire. By another account, Saruman still had Gandalf as a prisoner when the Nazgul arrived. The White Wizard assured the Ringwraiths that he would obtain the Shire's whereabouts from the Grey Pilgrim or hand him over to them. Daunted by the full horror of service to Mordor, Saruman had actually been about to beg Gandalf for forgiveness and help, only to find him gone. Nonetheless, he pretended that the Grey Pilgrim was still there and had just given up the location of the Shire. Saruman believed he now had enough time to try seize the ring, while still feigning allegiance to Sauron. But the Ringwraiths soon learned that the White Wizard knew far more than he had shared with them. On their way to the Shire, the Nazgul met one of Saruman's agents in Eriador, from whom they got detailed maps of the Shire. They sent the spy back to the Shire, after warning him that he was now in the service of Mordor, not Isengard. The spy in question was the ill-favored Dunlending at the Prancing Pony. Commanded by Sauron, Saruman moved against Theoden to keep Rohan from riding to Gondor's aid. With Grima preventing any military mobilization within the kingdom, Saruman sent large raiding forces to wreak havoc in the Westfold of Rohan. The only true obstacles to his invasion were Theoden's son and nephew, Theodred and Eomer respectively. As Wormtongue had failed to turn the two men against each other, the White Wizard tasked his servants to slay the king's heir at all costs. Per this special order, the warriors of Isengard engaged the defenders of Rohan at the fords of Isen. The first battle at the fords of Isen ended in the death of Theodred, followed by the retreat of Saruman's hordes. At the same time, the corrupted wizard also tried to betray his master. He sent trusted warbands to hunt down the Fellowship and capture the ring-bearer. Saruman's scouts, led by Ugluk, ambushed the company at Amon Hen, where they took Pippin and Merry captive, while also shooting Boromir with many black-feathered arrows when he tried to defend the hobbits. Slowed on their way back to Isengard by conflict with Mordor orcs sent by a suspicious Sauron, the Isengarders were slain on the eaves of Fangorn by Rohirrim, led by Eomer. Gimli believed he had glimpsed Saruman at the site of the skirmish, presumably having hastened to claim the ring from the hobbits. The White Wizard's position was becoming dangerously isolated. His neighbors he had made his enemies, and he had also cheated his new master. Believing he might yet claim lordship over Rohan and regain Sauron's favor by delivering the Rohirrim to him, Saruman intensified his efforts against Theoden. Although Grima Wormtongue had been ousted as an agent of the enemy, Rohan had been weakened, allowing Saruman to marshal his full might and unleash his Uruk-hai hordes upon the Rohirrim people at Helm's Deep. Though it initially held the upper hand, Saruman's army was vanquished in the Battle of the Hornburg, its ranks broken by Gandalf's reinforcements. Meanwhile, the wizard also found his own stronghold under assault. The Ents led by Treebeard besieged Isengard, seeking vengeance for incursions by orc axemen into Fangorn. These two confrontations led to the end of Saruman's reign of terror in the west, while also costing Sauron a valuable, albeit duplicitous, vassal.
Gandalf in the world of Middle-earth is not just a wizard. He is one of the most important and mysterious characters in the universe, the personification of wisdom, power, and the fight against evil. In ancient times, when Arda was still young, Gandalf was one of the Maiar, spirits sent by the gods to help shape and protect the world from evil. He was one of the 5 great Maiar, and his true name was Olorin. In modern times, when Sauron the Dark Lord began his rebellion and sought to seize power over Middle-earth with the Ring of Power, Gandalf played a key role in the fight against him. He was sent to the west, in the guise of an old man with a gray beard, to collect information, inspire peoples, and unite them in the fight against darkness. He possesses various types of magic, which he uses in his efforts to protect Middle-earth from darkness and evil. His magic is usually divided into several categories. 1. Elemental magic. Gandalf has the ability to manipulate various elements such as fire, air, water, and earth. He can cause fire, create whirlwinds, manipulate water, and cause earthquakes. 2. Magic of light and shadow. Gandalf is a master of magic of light and shadow. He can use light to drive away darkness and create protective barriers. He also has the power over darkness, allowing him to resist evil influences and creatures. 3. Magic of illusions. Gandalf can create illusions and deceive enemies, forcing them to see and perceive things that are not really there. 4. Will magic. One of the most powerful aspects of Gandalf's magic is his ability to influence the will of other beings. He can inspire courage and determination in his allies, as well as resist the influence of dark forces on their minds. 5. Magic of the Ring. Although Gandalf cannot use the Ring of Power directly due to its destructive power and influence, he has knowledge of it and can act according to its effects on the world around him. Gandalf often uses his magic, combined with his wisdom, leadership, and combat prowess, to protect his friends and resist the dark forces of Middle-earth. In the life of Gandalf, the great wizard from the Lord of the Rings, there was no permanent residence, like many other inhabitants of Middle-earth. The whole world was his home, and the stars were his shelter. He was a wanderer, never staying in one place for long. However, there is one place that is most associated with him: his modest home in Hobbiton, where he often visited his friend, the great hobbit Bilbo Baggins. Gandalf's house in Hobbiton was unusual and mysterious, like its owner himself. He stood on the edge of the forest, surrounded by trees and vineyards. This ancient house, covered with vines and greenery, seemed to be part of nature, merging with the surrounding landscape. Inside, the house was filled with mysterious artifacts, ancient scrolls and treasures that Gandalf had collected during his many travels. Maps and images of distant lands hung on the walls, and in the corner stood an old table covered with parchments and books. Here, Gandalf often spent time studying ancient texts and planning his next steps in the fight against darkness. But despite his penchant for wandering, the house in Hobbiton always remained a cozy refuge for Gandalf, where he could take a short break from his many duties and enjoy the peace and warmth of the friendly company of Bilbo Baggins and his nephew Frodo. This home, although modest in comparison to castles and palaces, was a place where a wise and powerful wizard could feel at home, surrounded by good friends and his favorite books. The life of Gandalf, the wizard from the Lord of the Rings, was full of adventures, wanderings, and the fight against evil. His main calling was to serve the light and protect Middle-earth from darkness and destruction. 1. Advisor and mentor. Gandalf was known for his wisdom and the advice he gave to the rulers and peoples of Middle-earth. He helped resolve conflicts, prevented wars, and helped maintain peace and order. 2. Darkness fighter. One of the main aspects of Gandalf's life was his fight against evil and darkness. He resisted the power of Sauron, helped his allies in their struggle, and directed the forces of light in the fight against dark forces. 3. Member of the Fellowship of the Ring. Gandalf was a member of the Fellowship of the Ring, a group gathered to destroy the Ring of Power and defeat Sauron. His role on this journey was not only to provide combat support, but also to guide and inspire the other members of the group. 4. Explorer. Gandalf was also known for his desire for knowledge and exploration. He studied artifacts, magical objects, and ancient texts to understand the nature of evil and find ways to defeat it. 5. The Traveler. During his life, Gandalf traveled widely throughout Middle-earth and beyond. He explored ancient ruins, met different peoples and races, sought allies, and helped those who needed his help. In general, Gandalf's life was dedicated to serving good, protecting the world and fighting against darkness. His contribution to the struggle for freedom and justice in Middle-earth was invaluable. Gandalf was also a member of the Fellowship of the Ring, a group formed to destroy the Ring of Power and defeat Sauron. His role on this journey was not only to fight his enemies, but also to guide and inspire his allies with his wisdom and advice. One of the most important moments of his story was his rebirth as Gandalf the White after his battle with the Balrog in Moria. In this new form, he became even more powerful and acted as the leader of the Free People's Alliance in the struggle for Middle-earth. Throughout his long life, Gandalf embodied the highest ideals of goodness, wisdom, and selflessness. His strength was not only in his magic, but also in his ability to inspire others to do good deeds and fight for justice. In the end, thanks to his efforts and sacrifices, the darkness was defeated and the world found its balance again. After the last act of the great journey was completed and the One Ring was destroyed in the flames of Mount Orodruin, Middle-earth felt the wave of freedom and relief that inevitably comes after the end of war. The great victory was won, and Sauron was defeated. Gandalf, like his fellow fellowships, was catching his breath from years of fighting. Standing on the hills of the Fellowship, Gandalf watched as the sun rose over the craggy peaks of Mordor, bathed in the light of a new age. He felt the invisible shackles of evil that had long held Middle-earth in their enslavement crumble to dust. But although the darkness was defeated, the world required further attention and care. Gandalf, tireless in his devotion, began a new chapter of his life after the fall of Sauron. He turned his gaze to the east, to distant lands, where the need for help was most acute. Middle-earth was ravaged by war, and Gandalf felt it was his duty to help rebuild the destroyed areas and restore peace. Thus began his journey, filled with new challenges and tasks. Together with his friends and allies, he helped restore kingdoms and supported peoples in their quest for peace and justice. His wisdom and strength were constant supports for those who needed them. Over the years, Gandalf continued his mission, working tirelessly for the good of Middle-earth. And although his adventures after the great victory may have been less impressive than the fight against Sauron himself, his contribution to the creation of the New World was no less significant. Thus ended the story of the great wizard, who continued his struggle for good and justice in a world freed from darkness and the threat of the ring.